for 2 years. I could not get hired within 50 miles of home. It was not because I lacked skills, but because my own parents whispered one word to every employer thief. They believed they could starve me back into submission. They did not know my grandmother had been planning for this since I was a child. And they definitely did not know the person interviewing me had been waiting over 10 years for this exact moment. My name is Hazel Ellis. I am 27 years old, and on paper, I am the perfect candidate. I hold a degree in accounting with honors. My transcripts show a 4.0 grade point average, and I can navigate a complex audit before most people have finished their first cup of coffee. I am organized, I am diligent, and I have never stolen a penny in my life. Yet, for the last 2 years, I have been unemployable in my own county. It is a strange feeling to walk into a room, confident in your ability, only to watch the air leave the space the moment you introduce yourself. I have sat across from hiring managers at local banks, logistics firms, and even small family-owned dispensaries. I watch their eyes light up when they see my resume. They nod at my certifications. They smile at my answers regarding tax compliance and fiscal responsibility. Then, inevitably, they glance at the name at the top of the page. Ellis. Sometimes they ask, usually, they do not have to. They just make a note to call my references, and that is where my life ends. Because in Brackenridge County, my references are my parents, and my parents have made sure that the only thing anyone knows about me is a lie. The rumor is simple, efficient, and devastating. I am the girl who steals. It does not matter that I have receipts. It does not matter that the theft they claim I committed was actually me paying for my own college textbooks with a card they gave me for school expenses. Facts do not travel as fast as gossip, especially when the gossip comes from Calvin and Lydia Ellis. My father owns half the construction supply chain in this part of the state. My mother chairs 3 different charity boards. They are the pillars of the community. I am just the daughter who went astray. When they whisper that I cannot be trusted around petty cash, people listen. They do not ask for proof. They just thank me for coming in. Promise to be in touch. And then the phone never rings. I have spent 730 days in this suffocation. It is a silent, bloodless violence. My parents do not beat me. They do not scream. They do not make scenes in the grocery store. That would be beneath them. Their cruelty is quiet. It is the click of a lock. It is a frozen bank account. It is a polite conversation with a potential employer at the country club, where my father sighs and says, "We love Hazel, but we just want to protect you from her tendencies." They call it discipline. They say they are doing this to teach me the value of loyalty. They think that if they close enough doors, if they starve me of enough opportunities, I will eventually crawl back to their doorstep, apologize for crimes I did not commit, and accept the life they chose for me. A life of quiet obedience, a strategic marriage, and total financial dependence. They want to break my spine so I can never stand up without them again, but they made a miscalculation. They forgot about June, my grandmother. June Caldwell was the only person in our bloodline who understood that money is a tool, not a weapon. She died 4 years ago, and my father thought he had buried her legacy along with her body. He took over her assets, managed her estate, and erased her influence, or so he thought. He did not know that she saw him clearly. She saw the greed in his eyes and the control in his hands, and she saw me. She saw the way I was shrinking under their roof. She left something for me, not in the will, where my father could contest it, and not in a bank account he could freeze. She left an envelope in a safety deposit box that he does not know exists, and inside that envelope was a path to the one place my father is currently desperate to reach. It is almost funny. For months, I have heard my father on the phone, his voice taking on that oily, persuasive tone he uses when he wants something. He has been trying to secure an invitation to the upcoming gala hosted by the Crownford Meridian Group. It is the business event of the decade. A merger is happening, a massive expansion that could double my father's net worth if he can just get in the room with the right people. He has pulled strings. He has called in favors. He is desperate to walk through those doors and shake hands with the elite. He has no idea that I am about to walk through those same doors. And I won't be begging for an invite. I am not doing this to win his approval. That ship sailed the day he looked at a spreadsheet of my tuition costs and decided to call it embezzlement. I am not doing this to humiliate him, though I suspect that will be a byproduct. I am doing this to survive. I am doing this because I am tired of drowning in shallow water. I want to breathe without feeling his hand around my throat. I want a job where my paycheck does not come with a side of emotional blackmail. This morning, I received an email that should have been impossible. It was a request for an interview at Crownford Meridian, but it was not with HR. It was not with a department head. The email stated, in clear, concise text, that I was to meet with Marianne Vale, the chief executive officer. At first, I thought it was a cruel prank. Why would the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate want to interview a disgraced accountant from a small town? Why would she care about Hazel Ellis? I almost deleted it. But then, I looked at the timestamp. I looked at the formatting. It was real. And when I called the number to confirm, the receptionist did not ask who I was. She said, "We have been expecting you, Ms. Ellis. The system flagged your name immediately." Flagged my name, usually, when my name is flagged. It means my father has gotten there first. It means a warning has popped up on a screen, "Do not hire, security risk." My stomach dropped when she said it. I almost hung up. I assumed my father had reached even this far, that his poison had seeped into the city, into the high-rise towers where I hoped to hide. But the receptionist's voice was not cold. It was not dismissive. It sounded reverent. "Ms. Vale has cleared her schedule for you," she said. That was the moment the fear turned into something else. Something like adrenaline. Something like hope. My father believes he controls the narrative. He believes that by labeling me a thief, he has destroyed my credibility forever. He thinks that if he repeats the lie often enough, it becomes the truth. He is preparing for his big night at the gala, polishing his shoes, rehearsing his jokes, ready to charm the power players of the industry. He is ready to play the role of the benevolent patriarch, the successful businessman with the tragic, troubled daughter. He does not know that the envelope my grandmother left me contains more than just a letter. He does not know that the woman he is trying to impress, Marianne Vale, has been holding a seat for me for over 10 years. And he definitely does not know that when he opens his mouth to destroy me one last time, he is going to walk straight into a trap that was set before I even graduated high school. I can picture it now. The ballroom will be filled with crystal chandeliers and expensive suits. The air will smell of champagne and ambition. My father will spot me. He will freeze. He will wonder how I got past security. He will come over, his smile tight, his eyes furious, and he will try to quietly escort me out. He will lean in and whisper threats, and when that does not work, he will raise his voice. He will do the one thing he avoids doing in public. He will lose his composure. He will point a finger at me and tell the room that I am a thief. He will think he is playing his ace card. He will expect the security guards to grab me. He will expect the room to turn against me. But he is going to say it in the wrong room. He is going to say it in front of the one woman who knows exactly where the money went, and when he does, everything he has built, the reputation, the respect, the illusion of the perfect family is going to collapse. I am not a vengeful person by nature. I liked my quiet life. I liked my spreadsheets and my routine. I wanted to be an accountant, not a protagonist in a drama, but they took that away from me. They took my name and turned it into a warning label. They took my future and held it hostage. So now, I have to take it back. I am standing at the bus stop, clutching a cheap leather portfolio that contains the only resume I have left. I am wearing a suit I bought at a thrift store because I cannot afford a new one. I have $40 in my bank account. My stomach is twisting in knots. I am terrified. But I'm getting on the bus. Because I know something my father does not. I know that the story he is telling is about to end, and mine is just beginning. It is funny how memory works. Standing here, waiting for the transport that will take me away from the only home I have ever known. I can see the timeline clearly. I can see the exact moment the trap snapped shut. It wasn't last week. It wasn't the last rejected job application. It started when I was hopeful. It started when I thought I had escaped. 2 years earlier. I thought my life was finally starting. To understand how I became a pariah. You have to understand the kingdom my father built and the role I was assigned within it. Brackenridge County is not a place where secrets stay buried for long. Unless you have the money to pour concrete over them, and my family owns the concrete. In our corner of the state, the Ellis name is not merely a surname, it is a brand stamped on every construction site, every charity gala program, and the brass plaques of the church pews. If you drive down Main Street, you will see Ellis Material Supply trucks rumbling past, heavy with lumber and steel. If you attend the annual Founders' Day picnic, you will see my father shaking hands with the mayor, laughing that booming, confident laugh that makes other men feel smaller. To the outside world, we were the picture of American success. We were the family on the Christmas card that everyone pinned to their refrigerator with a mix of admiration and envy. We had the sprawling colonial house on the hill, the manicured lawn that looked like a golf course, and the reputation for unwavering traditional values. My father, Calvin Ellis, was the architect of this image. He was a man who believed that perception was reality. He did not just own a business, he owned favors. He held the mortgages of the local subcontractors in his private ledger. He sat on the bank board that approved small business loans. He was the first to donate $5,000 to the high school football stadium renovation, ensuring that his name was painted in bold letters above the scoreboard. He cultivated an air of benevolent authority. He was the man you went to when you were in trouble, provided you were willing to kiss the ring. Then there was my mother, Lydia. If my father was the iron fist, she was the velvet glove that hid the bruises. She was beautiful in a way that felt practiced. Her hair always perfectly coiffed, her pearls always straight. She played the role of the peacemaker with frightening efficiency. Her voice never rose above a soothing melodic hum. She had a talent for taking a cruel remark and repackaging it as maternal concern. When she criticized my appearance, she would say she was just worried I would not attract the right kind of husband. When she dismissed my ambitions, she would claim she only wanted to save me from the stress of a man's world. She made submission feel like a warm blanket, suffocating you while telling you to rest. And then there was Weston. My brother was 2 years older than me, and from the moment he drew his first breath, he was the crown prince. Weston did not have to earn his place at the table. He was born seated at the head of it. He was handsome, athletic enough to play varsity, but not talented enough to play college, and charming in a vacant, easy way. He was the heir apparent. My parents treated his mediocrity as if it were brilliance. If Weston managed to pass a class with a C average, my father would clap him on the back and talk about his practical intelligence. If Weston got a speeding ticket, it was a youthful indiscretion that my father quietly made disappear with a phone call to the sheriff. Weston was proof that Calvin Ellis had built a legacy that would outlast him. He was the son, the investment, the future of the company. I, on the other hand, was the daughter. And in the Ellis household, a daughter was a very different category of asset. The imbalance was most visible at the dinner table. Sunday dinner was mandatory, a performance of family unity that we enacted every week at 6 o'clock sharp. The dining room was formal. With heavy mahogany furniture and stiff linen napkins, I can still hear the clink of silver against china, the sound of my father slicing through a roast as he held court. "Weston," my father would say, looking at my brother with a glow of pride, "I want you to sit in on the meeting with the zoning board tomorrow. It is time you learned how we handle the city council." Weston would nod, his mouth full, looking bored by the prospect of power that was being handed to him. "Sure, Dad, whatever." Then my father would turn his gaze to me. It was a different look. It was the look a manager gives an underperforming employee. "Hazel, you are looking a bit pale. Are you eating enough? We can't have you looking sickly at the charity auction next week. The McAllisters are bringing their son, the one who just finished law school. That was the extent of his interest. While he groomed Weston to take over the empire, he groomed me to be a decorative accessory to someone else's. In Calvin Ellis's belief system, a son was a capital investment, something you poured resources into because it would yield a return. A daughter was a liability. I was something to be managed, maintained, and eventually offloaded to another man who could handle the upkeep. My intellect, my grades, my drive, they were not assets to him. They were complications. A smart woman was a difficult woman, and difficult women did not make good wives for the sons of his business partners. It wasn't that they didn't spend money on me. They did, but their generosity was weaponized. This is the part people from the outside never understood. They saw the nice clothes, the car I drove in high school, the safe neighborhood, and they assumed I was spoiled. They did not see the invisible chains attached to every single gift. In the Ellis family, nothing was free. If my father bought me a car, it was in his name, and he kept a spare key so he could take it away the moment I displeased him. If my mother bought me a dress, it was the dress she wanted me to wear, and refusing it meant I was ungrateful for her sacrifice. Every dollar they spent on me was a deposit in a bank of obedience, and they expected to collect the interest whenever they demanded it. They used money to infantilize me. If I wanted to do something independent, like a summer camp for math or a trip with friends, they would offer to pay for it. But only if I agreed to their terms, calling in at specific times, staying where they told me, behaving exactly as they dictated. If I resisted, the funding vanished, and I was left with the guilt of having hurt them. I grew up thinking love was a transaction. I thought affection was something you purchased with silence and compliance. There was only one person who saw the rot beneath the floorboards. My grandmother, June Caldwell, was my mother's mother. But the two women could not have been more different if they were from different species. Grandma June was not polished. She was not a peacemaker. She was a force of nature wrapped in tweed blazers and smelling faintly of menthol cigarettes and old paper. June had been widowed young, back in the 70s, a time when women in this county were expected to fade into the background. Instead, she had taken her husband's small failing hardware store and turned it into a profitable commercial real estate portfolio. She was self-made, financially literate, and brutally blunt. She didn't care about the country club. She didn't care about appearing soft. She cared about the bottom line and the truth, usually in that order. My father hated her. He feared her, too. Though he would never admit it, he hated that she had her own money that he couldn't touch. He hated that she didn't buy into his myth of the great patriarch. When he boasted at dinner about a killing he made in the market, Grandma June would peer over her reading glasses and ask a single, pointed question about his liquidity ratios that would make him stutter. She was the only adult who looked at me and saw a person, not a prop. When I was 16, I started sneaking over to her house on weekends. It was a sanctuary. Her living room was cluttered with books, financial journals, and maps. She didn't ask me about boys. She didn't tell me to smile more. She taught me how to read a balance sheet. She explained the difference between an asset and a liability. She showed me how compound interest could either save your life or ruin it. "Your father thinks he's a king," she told me once, pouring herself a glass of iced tea. "But kings get lazy. They forget that the castle walls need maintenance. He thinks he owns everyone in this town because he holds their debt. But debt is a two-way street. Hazel, it makes people desperate, and desperate people are dangerous." She saw the way my parents treated me. She saw the way Weston was allowed to fail upward while I was punished for succeeding in ways they didn't approve of. She saw the golden cage they were building around me, bar by bar. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, during my senior year of high school, I was sitting at her kitchen table, crying. My father had just forbidden me from applying to an out-of-state university that had offered me a partial scholarship. He said it was too far, that I didn't need to go to a liberal school that would fill my head with nonsense, that the local state college was good enough for a girl who would probably just get married anyway. He had threatened to cut me off completely if I sent the acceptance letter. Grandma June sat across from me, her hands wrapped around a warm mug. She didn't offer me a tissue. She didn't tell me it would be okay. She looked me dead in the eye with an intensity that made me stop sobbing. "Listen to me, Hazel," she said, her voice raspy but steady. "Your father uses money like a leash. As long as you need his money, you belong to him. He will never let you go willingly. He needs you to be small so he can feel big." She reached across the table and tapped her finger on my hand. "You are going to have to play the long game. You go to the school he wants. You smile. You nod. You learn everything you can about how money works, better than he knows, because one day, the leash is going to get too tight. One day, he is going to push you into a corner you can't smile your way out of." She leaned back, a shadow crossing her face, as if she were looking at a future I couldn't see yet. "When that day comes," she said, almost to herself, "you are going to need an exit, a real one, not just a bus ticket, but a way to walk out that door and never look back." I wiped my eyes, confused. "But I don't have anything. Grandma, he controls everything." She smiled then, a small, secretive smile that didn't reach her eyes but curled the corners of her mouth. It was the smile of a woman who had already won a game the other players didn't know had started. "You don't have anything yet," she corrected, "but I have been watching, and I have been planning. I have built a door for you. Hazel, it is locked right now, and you are not ready to open it, but it is there." At the time, I thought she meant she had set aside a savings bond or maybe a small trust fund for my wedding. I had no idea of the scale of what she was doing. I had no idea that while my father was busy buying influence in Brackenridge County, she was quietly moving pieces on a chessboard 3 states away. "Just remember," she added, her voice dropping to a whisper as the rain hammered against the window, "when the time comes, don't ask for permission. Just turn the key." That was the last real conversation we had before her stroke, but those words stayed with me, lodging themselves in the back of my mind like a dormant seed. I went back to my parents' house. I played the role of the dutiful daughter. I went to the local college. I cleared the plates at Sunday dinner while Weston bragged about his golf handicap. I let them think they had won, but I never forgot the look in Grandma June's eyes. It was the only thing that kept me sane when the walls started closing in. I just didn't realize how soon I would need that key, or how devastating the lock would be when it finally clicked shut. It started with a piece of plastic that weighed less than an ounce but carried the gravitational pull of a black hole. During my junior year of college, my parents sat me down in the living room. The atmosphere was ceremonial, the way it always was when Calvin Ellis was about to bestow a favor. My father placed a platinum credit card on the coffee table. He did not hand it to me. He placed it there, like a treaty I was expected to sign in blood. He told me this was for school essentials. He gave a speech about trust, about how I was entering the final stretch of my education, and how he wanted to remove the financial friction so I could focus on my grades. My mother sat beside him, nodding encouragingly, her hands folded in her lap. She told me they were proud of how hard I was studying. For a moment, just a fleeting second, I let myself believe them. I let myself believe that my grim determination to succeed had finally earned their respect. I took the card. I felt a wave of gratitude that I now realize was exactly what they wanted. They were buying my guard down. I treated that card like it was made of glass. I did not buy clothes. I did not buy late-night pizzas for my roommates. I did not use it for gas to go to the movies. I used it strictly for the items listed on my syllabi. I bought the required textbooks, which were extortionately expensive. I paid for the online access codes for my accounting labs. I purchased a specific financial modeling software required for my advanced auditing class. Every time I swiped it, I kept the receipt. I stapled the confirmation emails to the physical slips. I was an accounting major. Paper trails were my religion. 3 months later, the statement arrived. I was home for a weekend break when my father called me into his study. The room smelled of lemon polish and cigar smoke. He was sitting behind his massive oak desk, the credit card statement laid out in front of him like evidence in a murder trial. He did not look up when I entered. He just circled one line item in red ink and pushed the paper toward me. It was a charge for $240. The vendor was a software company. I explained immediately. I told him it was the student license for the auditing platform I needed for my final project. I told him I could show him the syllabus, the professor's requirement list, and the installation files on my laptop. He held up a hand to stop me. He said he did not care what the professor said. He said $240 for a computer game was theft. He called it frivolous. He said I was abusing his generosity to buy toys. I tried to argue logic. I brought up the tuition costs he paid without blinking. I asked why he would pay thousands for the class, but refused the tool needed to pass it. He looked at me with a cold, flat stare and said the words that would define the next 5 years of my life. He said I was a thief. He said I had looked him in the eye, promised to use the money for essentials, and then stole from him to entertain myself. It was not a misunderstanding. Even then, I knew he was not actually confused about the software. He was bored. He needed a conflict to manage, a sinner to punish, and I was the available target. He needed to remind me that his support was a tap he could turn off whenever he pleased. The sentence was handed down immediately. I was to repay the entire balance of the card. Not just the software charge, but every textbook, every lab fee, every pencil. The total was nearly $2,000. If I did not agree to a repayment plan immediately, he would stop paying my rent at the apartment near campus. I would be evicted. I would have to drop out. I stood there, shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it was burning the lining of my stomach. I walked out of his office and went straight to my room. I did not cry. I opened my backpack and took out a fresh binder. I labeled it The Repayment. I spent that night organizing every single receipt. I photocopied the syllabus highlighting the software requirement. I printed the email from the professor. I created a ledger. If he wanted to treat me like a criminal, I would defend myself like a forensic accountant. I documented the date of the conversation, the time, and the specific threat of eviction. It was the first time I realized that my survival depended on proving my own reality, because my family was actively trying to rewrite it. The punishment rippled outward, touching every part of my life. To pay him back without dropping out, I had to take a second job. I was already working 15 hours a week at the university library. I added weekend shifts at a diner on the highway, working the graveyard shift from 10 at night until 6 in the morning on Fridays and Saturdays. My grades did not slip, but my health did. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping. I missed social events, networking mixers, and study groups because I was pouring coffee for truckers to pay back a debt that shouldn't have existed. When I told my parents I might need to delay my graduation by a semester to manage the workload, my father sighed. He told me that my expensive attitude was costing the family time and money. He framed my exhaustion as a character flaw. He said if I had just been honest from the beginning, none of this would be happening. He was rewriting history in real time, and everyone else was reading his draft. My mother was the worst kind of accomplice. She would call me while I was driving between jobs, her voice thick with that weaponized sweetness. She would tell me she sent a care package with cookies, as if sugar could fix the fact that her husband was financially abusing her daughter. When I tried to talk to her about the injustice, about the receipts I had, she would cut me off gently. She would say he just wanted to teach me responsibility. She would say he was hard on me because he saw potential, but the subtext was always clear. She was telling me to stop fighting. She was telling me that my truth was inconvenient for her marriage. She wanted me to apologize for something I didn't do so that dinner could be pleasant again. She wanted peace, even if the price of that peace was my dignity. Then there was Weston. My brother thought the whole thing was hilarious. To him, money was an infinite resource. He wrecked a car his sophomore year, and my father replaced it within a week. Weston never had to pay back a dime. When he found out about my debt, it became his favorite joke. At Thanksgiving, he made a show of counting the silverware before I left the table. "Just checking," he said, grinning at his girlfriend. "You have to watch your wallet around Hazel. She has sticky fingers." Everyone laughed. My father chuckled as he carved the turkey. My mother gave a tight, indulgent smile and told Weston to stop teasing his sister. But nobody said it wasn't true. Nobody said, Hazel worked 3 jobs to pay for her own education. They just laughed. I sat there and ate my potatoes, and I let the humiliation settle in my chest like concrete. I didn't fight back. I didn't storm out. I just added the date and the comment to my mental ledger. I was learning that anger was energy, and I couldn't afford to waste it on people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I graduated 6 months late, but I graduated. I walked across the stage with honors, my cords draped over a gown I had paid for myself. My parents attended, sitting in the front row, clapping politely. They took photos. They posted them on social media with captions about how proud they were of their hard-working daughter. The dissonance made me nauseous. A week after graduation, my father summoned me to his office again. I thought, foolishly, that this was the end of it. I thought that because I had paid off the debt, because I had the degree, because I had proven my resilience, he would finally respect me. I walked in with my resume, ready to ask for his advice on applying to firms in the city. He didn't want to see my resume. He wanted to offer me a job. I have spoken to a few people, he said, leaning back in his chair. And frankly, Hazel, with your history, it is going to be hard for you to find a position at a reputable firm. Character matters in accounting. People talk. I felt the blood drain from my face. He had already started the whispers. He had been poisoning the well before I even had a chance to drink from it. However, he continued, I am willing to give you a chance. We need a clerk in the invoicing department at the supply yard. It is entry level. The pay is minimum wage to start. But if you keep your nose clean, we can discuss a raise in a year or two. He pushed a contract across the desk. It was not a job offer. It was a cage. The salary was less than half of what a starting accountant made. The role was glorified data entry. It reported directly to the office manager, a woman known for her loyalty to my father. But the worst part was the clause at the bottom. It required me to live at home. It required me to sign a statement acknowledging that this employment was probationary due to past personal conduct issues. He was offering me public forgiveness in exchange for my private surrender. He wanted me to sign a confession. He wanted me to stay under his roof, under his thumb, working for his company, grateful for the scraps he threw me. He wanted to break me so thoroughly that I would never dream of leaving again. I looked at the paper. I looked at him. I have some interviews lined up in the city. I lied. My voice was steady, though my hands were trembling in my lap. He raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Well, you go ahead and take those interviews. Hazel, but when they call me for a reference, and they will, what do you think I am going to tell them? He smiled. It was a terrifying, benevolent smile. I will tell them the truth, he said. I will tell them you are family, and we love you, but you have a complicated relationship with other people's money. I realized then that the theft of the software charge had never been about the $240. It was a long-term investment. He had manufactured a crime so that he could be the only one gracious enough to hire the criminal. I stood up. I didn't take the contract. I will let you know, I said. Don't take too long, he called after me as I walked to the door. The offer expires on Monday. And Hazel? Don't be ungrateful. Most fathers wouldn't hire a thief. I walked out of the house and into the humid night air. I didn't know where I was going to work. I didn't know how I was going to pay rent. But I knew one thing for certain. I was not signing that paper. I spent the next 2 weeks applying to every single accounting firm, credit union, and payroll department within a 3-hour radius. I had the grades, I had the work ethic, I had the experience of managing a budget under extreme duress. But my father was right about one thing. People talked. And when Calvin Ellis spoke, people listened. I was about to find out just how loud a whisper could be. The silence that followed graduation was not peaceful. It was heavy, thick, and suffocating. It felt like the air pressure drop before a tornado touches down. I approached my job hunt with the same military precision I had applied to my repayment plan. I treated it like a numbers game. I told myself that if I sent out enough applications, the laws of probability would eventually work in my favor. I had the degree, I had the honors cords, I had a work ethic that had been forged in the fires of 3 simultaneous jobs. I was a catch. I created a spreadsheet to track my applications. In the first month, I sent out 45 resumes. I applied to every accounting firm within a 60-mile radius. When those dried up, I widened the net. I applied to credit unions, payroll processing centers, medical billing departments at local hospitals, and even administrative roles at logistics companies. I was not being picky. I was willing to start at the bottom, knowing I could work my way up once I had a foot in the door. At first, the responses were promising. My resume looked good on paper. I got calls. I got scheduled for interviews. I remember one interview specifically. It was with a mid-sized regional bank in the next town over. The hiring manager was a woman named Mrs. Gable, who had a kind face and a cluttered desk that made me feel instantly at home. The interview went perfectly. We talked about tax code changes and audit discrepancies. We laughed about the horrors of tax season. By the end of the hour, she was practically planning my orientation. She told me I was exactly what they were looking for: sharp, hungry, and local. She shook my hand firmly and said she just needed to run the standard background check and call my references, but she expected to have an offer letter to me by Friday. I walked out of that bank feeling like I was floating. I called my landlord and told him I would have the rent soon. I bought a celebratory coffee. I finally exhaled. Friday came and went. No email, no call. I waited until Monday morning to follow up. I sent a polite email, thanking her for her time and reiterating my interest. Nothing. On Wednesday, I called. The receptionist put me on hold for 5 minutes, then came back and said Mrs. Gable was in a meeting. On Friday, I called again. This time, the call went straight to voicemail. This pattern repeated itself with maddening consistency. I would have a fantastic interview. The chemistry would be great. The hiring manager would be enthusiastic. Then, a day or two later, the temperature would drop to absolute zero. Sometimes I got a generic rejection email stating they had decided to go in a different direction. Most of the time, I got nothing but ghosting. It started to mess with my head. I began to question my own reality. Was I misreading these interactions? Was I saying something offensive without realizing it? I started analyzing my reflection in the mirror before I left the house. Was my suit too cheap? Was my hair too messy? Did I have something in my teeth? I spent hours dissecting my own voice. Maybe I sounded desperate. Maybe I sounded arrogant. I practiced my handshake. I rewrote my resume 10 times, obsessing over fonts and margins, convinced that a formatting error was the reason my life was stalling. Rejection became a routine, a bitter vitamin I had to swallow every morning. I woke up, checked my email, saw the empty inbox, and felt a piece of my confidence chip away. I started to feel like I was walking around with a scarlet letter on my forehead that only other people could see. I felt dirty, flawed, and unworthy. I wondered if the stress of the last few years had broken something inside me that I couldn't fix. It took 3 months for the truth to finally break the surface. I had another interview, this time with a small manufacturing plant looking for a junior bookkeeper. The interview was with the owner, a gruff but fair man who seemed desperate for help. Again, it went well. He told me I was overqualified, but he would be happy to have me. He said he would call me the next day. He didn't. 2 days later, I drove to the plant. It was a bold move, maybe even desperate, but I needed to know. I walked into the front office and asked to speak to him. The receptionist looked uncomfortable but buzzed him. He came out to the lobby, but he didn't invite me back to his office. He stood behind the counter, his arms crossed, his body language closed off like a fortress. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I haven't heard from you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just wanted to follow up." He shifted his weight. "We filled the position, Ms. Ellis." "I understand," I said. "Can I ask, was it something I lacked I want to improve for my next interview?" He looked at me then, and for a split second, I saw pity in his eyes. It was a terrible, gut-wrenching pity. He looked at me like I was a wounded animal that he couldn't help. "It wasn't your skills," he said quietly. He glanced around the lobby to make sure no one was listening. You interview well. You seem like a smart girl. Then why? I pushed. Please, I have been rejected by 20 places in 3 months. I need to know. He sighed, a heavy, tired sound. I called your previous employer for a reference. Standard procedure. My previous employer, the supply yard, my father. My stomach dropped through the floor. And I was told that while you are bright, there were concerns regarding financial integrity. He paused, choosing his words carefully. He didn't go into details, but he used the word trust in this business. Ms. Ellis, I can't have someone on the books if there is a question mark next to their name regarding money. I just can't take the risk. I have never stolen anything, I whispered, my voice trembling. He looked at me with that same pity. You should talk to your father, Hazel. That is all I can say. He turned and walked back into the plant, leaving me standing alone in the dusty lobby with the sound of machinery humming in the distance. I did not go home. I drove straight to my parents' house. I drove 10 miles over the speed limit. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The landscape blurred past me, the cornfields, the strip malls, the church steeples, all the landmarks of the town that was slowly strangling me. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked majestic in the afternoon sun. The brick was scrubbed clean. The hedges were trimmed into perfect geometric shapes. It looked like the home of a good family, a decent family. I stormed through the front door. I didn't knock. I didn't take off my shoes. I walked straight to the back of the house, to the double oak doors of my father's home office. I threw the doors open. Calvin Ellis was sitting at his desk, reviewing a stack of blueprints. He had a tumbler of iced tea on a coaster and a classical music station playing softly in the background. He looked the picture of tranquility. He didn't jump. He didn't look surprised. He slowly lowered the blueprint he was holding and looked at me over the rim of his reading glasses. His expression was bored, as if I were a delivery driver who had interrupted his workflow. Distinct lack of manners, he said calmly. We knock in this house, Hazel. You told them, I said. My voice was shaking, not with fear, but with the vibration of pure adrenaline. You told the manufacturing plant. You told the bank. You told all of them. He took a sip of his tea. I assume you are referring to the reference calls. You told them I was a thief, I shouted. The sound of my own voice startled me. I never yelled at my father. It was a cardinal sin. Lower your voice, he said. His tone didn't change. It was flat, commanding. The voice he used on disobedient dogs. I did not use that word. I simply answered their questions honestly. Honestly? I laughed. A sharp, hysterical sound. You lied? You told them I couldn't be trusted with money. And can you? He set the glass down. You took a credit card that was given to you for specific purposes, and you used it for unauthorized purchases. In the business world. Hazel. That is called misappropriation of funds. It speaks to character. It speaks to a lack of discipline. I bought software for school, I screamed. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I carried everywhere, the folder with the receipts. I have the syllabus. I have the professor's email I paid you back every single cent. I have the bank transfer records right here. I slammed the folder onto his desk. Papers slid across the polished wood. He didn't even look at them. He didn't glance at the receipts. He looked right through them, as if they were invisible. It does not matter what you have in that folder, he said. It matters what I know, and I know that you are impulsive. I know that you think rules don't apply to you. If I let you go out into the world and handle other people's money, and you slip up again, that reflects on me. It reflects on this family. You are sabotaging me, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. This isn't about the software. You are deliberately making sure I can't get a job. I am protecting the community, he corrected me, and I am protecting you from your own arrogance. You are not ready for the responsibility you think you want. I graduated with honors. Academics are not character, he said dismissively. I looked at him, and I saw the monster. He wasn't doing this because he thought I was actually a thief. He knew I wasn't. He was doing this because he could. He was playing God with my livelihood because I had dared to try and build a life outside of his control. "Mom!" I yelled, turning toward the open door. "Mom!" I heard footsteps. A moment later, my mother appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a gardening apron, her hands gloved. She looked from me to my father, her eyes wide and frightened. "Lydia," my father said, his voice a warning. "He is ruining my life," I told her, tears finally spilling over. "He is telling everyone in town not to hire me. Mom, you know I paid him back. You know I didn't steal anything. Tell him to stop, please." My mother looked at me. For 1 second, I saw a flicker of something real in her face. I saw the mother who had bandaged my knees when I was a child. I saw the woman who knew, deep down, that her husband was a tyrant. I saw the hesitation. She looked at the receipts scattered on the desk. She knew the truth. Then, she looked at Calvin. He didn't say anything. He just stared at her. It was a look of absolute expectation. The light died in her eyes. She shrank. Her shoulders hunched forward, and she clasped her hands together. "Hazel," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Your father, he just wants what is best for you. Maybe you should listen to him." She turned and walked away. She chose the silence. She chose her safety over my survival. I stood there, feeling the room spin. I was alone. My father picked up the blueprints again. "You have a choice. Hazel, you can keep running around town, begging for scraps and getting doors slammed in your face. You can keep fighting a battle you have already lost." He paused and looked at me. "Or, you can come home. You can take the job at the supply yard. You can live here, where we can keep an eye on you. You can rebuild your trust with us. If you do that, I might be inclined to stop the rumors. In a few years, maybe I will vouch for you." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. It wasn't an offer. It was a hostage negotiation. He was telling me that my reputation, my ability to earn a living, my very existence in the professional world, belonged to him. In a small county like Brackenridge, reputation wasn't just social currency, it was economic oxygen. And my parents were cutting off my air supply on purpose. They didn't want to kill me. They wanted to disable me. They wanted to make the world so hostile, so cold, and so impossible that the only safe place left was the cage they had built in their own backyard. I looked at my father, at his calm, smug face. I looked at the receipts on the desk that proved my innocence, the papers that were worthless because the judge and the jury were the same person. "I will never work for you," I said. My voice was quiet now. The screaming was over. He shrugged, turning a page of his blueprints. "Then you will not work at all. The choice is yours." I turned and walked out of the office. I walked past the kitchen where my mother was hiding. I walked out the front door and got into my car. I didn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't. I had no rent money coming in. The clock was ticking on my savings. I had weeks, maybe days, before I hit absolute zero. I sat in my car at the end of their driveway and stared at the road. I realized then that being innocent didn't matter. Being competent didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was power, and I had none. But as I gripped the steering wheel, I felt a cold, hard resolve settling in my chest. If they wanted to cut off my oxygen, I would have to learn to breathe something else. I would have to find a place where their air didn't reach. I put the car in drive. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't turning back. The war had started, and the first casualty was the daughter they thought they knew. My savings account hit $314 on a Tuesday morning. That was the magic number. It was the exact amount I needed to keep my car insurance from lapsing and to buy enough groceries to survive the next 2 weeks. Rent was already late. The landlord, a patient man named Mr. Henderson, had given me a grace period, but I could hear the skepticism creeping into his voice. He knew what everyone in Brackenridge County was starting to suspect Hazel Ellis was sinking. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store. Staring at the dashboard, I had two choices. I could drive to the supply yard, walk into my father's office, sign his confession, and accept the cage. Or I could take the only job in town that didn't require a reference check from the local business association. I started the engine and drove toward the lake. Lakeshore Pines Lodge was a sprawling timber and stone resort that sat on the edge of the reservoir. It was where the wealthy tourists from the city came to pretend they were rustic, and where the local elite held their weddings and retirement parties. It was a place I had visited a dozen times as a guest. I had eaten brunch in the dining room. I had attended Sweet 16 parties in the ballroom. I parked my car around the back, near the loading docks where the dumpsters were kept. I walked through the service entrance, past the smell of rotting vegetables and stale beer, and found the office of the housekeeping manager. Tessa Grady was a woman carved out of granite. She was in her 50s, with skin weathered by cigarettes and a gaze that could strip paint off a wall. She didn't look up when I walked in. She was buried under a pile of linen requisition forms. "I need a job," I said. "I can start today." Tessa looked up. She took in my blazer, my polished shoes, and the desperation vibrating off me. She picked up the application I had filled out in the lobby. She didn't read the education section. She didn't look at the honors or the internships. She looked at the blank space where my references should have been. "You're the Ellis girl," she said. It wasn't a question. "Does that matter?" I asked. She leaned back in her chair, lighting a cigarette despite the no smoking sign taped to her monitor. "I don't care who your daddy is. I don't care if you can balance a checkbook or quote Shakespeare. I care if you show up on time. I care if you can scrub a toilet without vomiting. And I care if you keep your drama out of my hallways. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. $10 an hour," she said, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. "Tips are yours to keep, but don't hold your breath. The rich ones are the stingiest. You start in 20 minutes. Go find Maria in the laundry room for a uniform." 20 minutes later, I was no longer Hazel Ellis, the honors graduate. I was housekeeper number 4. The uniform was a polyester tunic in a hideous shade of maroon, paired with black elastic waist pants that were 2 sizes too big. I put my hair up in a hairnet. I took off my watch. I looked in the cracked mirror of the employee locker room and saw a stranger. For the first time in my life, I was invisible. The work was brutal in a way I had never experienced. It wasn't the mental exhaustion of studying for finals. It was a physical assault. My day started at 5 in the morning. I spent 8 hours hauling carts filled with wet towels and stripping beds that smelled of strangers' sweat and perfume. My hands, which had only ever known the friction of a pen or a keyboard, were suddenly raw, red, and smelling constantly of industrial-strength bleach. I learned the hierarchy of the lodge quickly. The guests were the gods, the front desk staff were the priesthood, and we, the housekeepers, were the untouchables. I would walk into a room to clean, and the guests wouldn't even pause their conversations. They would step around me like I was a piece of furniture. I was cleaning up their messes, their spilled wine, their discarded makeup wipes, their hair in the drain, and they looked right through me. "Excuse me," I would say, trying to maneuver the vacuum cleaner around a businessman's legs. He wouldn't move. He would just lift his foot an inch off the ground, eyes glued to his phone, as if I were a Roomba that had malfunctioned. I swallowed my pride every single hour. I scrubbed floors on my knees. I polished mirrors until my shoulders screamed. I learned that the hardest part wasn't the dirt. It was the silence. It was the feeling that my brain, the asset I had spent my whole life cultivating, was slowly atrophying, but I needed the money, every Friday. I took my paycheck to the bank. It was barely enough to cover rent and food, but it was mine. It was money my father hadn't touched. It was clean. At night, after a shift that left my back throbbing, I would go home to my small apartment, shower the smell of disinfectant off my skin, and open my laptop. I refused to let the blackballing be the end of me. I applied to jobs 2 hours away, 3 hours away. I looked for remote work. I looked for freelance bookkeeping gigs. But the gap on my resume was growing. It had been 6 months since graduation. Recruiters would call, enthusiastic at first, and then they would ask the question, "I see you graduated with honors. Hazel, but you haven't held a position in the field since then. What have you been doing?" I couldn't tell them I was cleaning toilets because my father was holding my reputation hostage. So I would stutter. I would say I was taking care of a family matter. I would say I was freelancing. "And do you have references for that freelance work?" The conversation would die there. The rumors were not just local anymore. They were a stench that followed me. In the digital age, a bad reputation travels faster than fiber optics. My father knew people who knew people. A quick LinkedIn search, a shared connection, a casual email he was poisoning the water supply downstream. One recruiter was blunt with me. "Hazel, I will be honest. I called a contact in your county just to verify your degree. They mentioned there was some litigation pending regarding your previous employment. We can't hire someone with open legal trouble." There was no litigation. It was just another lie. Another layer of the trap. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. I was tired. I was so incredibly tired. Then came the Thursday in November that broke the stalemate. It was a busy week at the lodge. A regional business conference was in town, and the hotel was at capacity. I had turned over 14 rooms in 6 hours. My hair was plastered to my forehead with sweat. My maroon tunic was stained with cleaning fluid. I was pushing my cart through the lobby, heading toward the service elevator, when I heard a voice that made my blood freeze. "Table for 4. Ellis." I stopped. My hands gripped the handle of the cart so hard my knuckles turned white. I looked across the lobby, past the oversized fireplace and the antler chandeliers, into the entrance of the Timberline restaurant. My father was standing at the host stand. He was wearing his charcoal wool suit, the one he wore for board meetings. He looked powerful, healthy, and rich. Next to him was my mother, looking elegant in a cream sweater, her eyes scanning the room with that practiced, vacuous smile. And beside her was Weston, laughing at something on his phone. They were here for dinner. They were here to celebrate. I should have run. I should have ducked into the stairwell, but my feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. I watched as the hostess led them to a prime table near the window. As they walked, my father turned his head. It was as if he had a radar for my misery. His eyes swept across the lobby and locked onto me. He stopped. I was standing there in my ill-fitting housekeeper's uniform, holding a bag of dirty towels, with a spray bottle hanging from my belt loop. I was the help. I was the failure. For a second, I thought he might look away. I thought he might be embarrassed to see his daughter in this state. But he didn't look away. He smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a general surveying a battlefield he had just conquered. He looked at my uniform, then at my face, and he nodded, a slow, satisfied movement of his chin. He was telling me, without saying a word. "I told you so. I told you that you were nothing without me." He tapped Weston on the shoulder and pointed. Weston looked up. He saw me. His eyes widened, and then a grin spread across his face. He didn't have the decency to be subtle. "Hey!" Weston shouted. His voice carried across the lobby, cutting through the low hum of conversation. "Hey, Hazel, we made a mess at the table earlier. You might want to bring a mop." He laughed. It was a loud, braying sound. Heads turned. Guests in the lobby looked at Weston, then followed his gaze to me. They saw the maid standing by the garbage cart. They saw the humiliation burning on my face. My mother grabbed Weston's arm, whispering something, but she didn't look at me. She studied the menu as if it contained the secrets of the universe. She was refusing to witness the execution. My father just kept smiling. He raised his hand in a mock wave, then turned his back to me and sat down at the table. I stood there for 5 seconds. 5 seconds that felt like 5 years. I could feel the tears pricking the back of my eyes. I could feel the sob rising in my throat. Every instinct in my body wanted to collapse. I wanted to run over there and scream at them. I wanted to beg them to stop hurting me. I wanted to curl up on the floor and disappear. But then, I looked at my father's back. I looked at the way he snapped his napkin open and placed it on his lap. He was so sure. He was so certain that this was the end of the story. He thought he was looking at a broken girl. Something inside my chest clicked. It was the sound of a lock engaging. The tears evaporated. The shame cooled into something hard and sharp, like a diamond. I did not cry. I did not run. I turned my cart around with a deliberate, steady motion. I walked to the service elevator. I pressed the button. I waited. I kept my chin up. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and let the metal doors close. Shutting them out, I finished my shift. I cleaned 3 more rooms. I scrubbed a bathtub until the porcelain shined. I didn't feel the pain in my back anymore. I was fueled by a cold, quiet fury. My father thought this was a punishment. He thought that by stripping me of my status, he was teaching me a lesson. But he was wrong. He wasn't breaking me. He was forging me. He was stripping away the softness, the naivety, the part of me that still wanted his approval. He was showing me exactly who he was, so that when I finally took him down, my hand wouldn't shake. I clocked out at 4 o'clock. I walked to my car. I drove home in silence. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, a voice echoed in my head. It wasn't my father's. It was Grandma June's. I remembered a rainy afternoon in her study. Years ago, we were going through old files. She had handed me a heavy, leather-bound ledger and told me to put it back on the shelf. "Hazel," she had said, her voice raspy. "Most people think power is noise. They think it's shouting and lawyers and big bank accounts. But real power is quiet. Real power is waiting until the other person thinks they have won." She had looked at me then, her eyes sharp. "When the time comes, you'll know. You will feel it in your gut. And when you feel it, you go to the paper. The truth is always in the paper." I dropped my keys on the counter. The time had come. I didn't take off my uniform. I walked straight to the closet in my bedroom. I pulled down the dusty cardboard box I had packed after Grandma's funeral, the box of random things she had left me that my father had deemed worthless. Old books, knitting needles, a collection of ceramic birds, and stacks of disorganized notes. I dragged the box into the living room and dumped it onto the floor. My father thought he had sanitized her estate. He thought he had scrubbed every asset and every account. He thought he controlled the paper trail. But Grandma June had taught me to look where others didn't. She had taught me that the most important secrets aren't locked in safes. They are hidden in plain sight, disguised as junk. I sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the artifacts of a dead woman, and I started to dig. I opened every book. I shook out every envelope. I read every scribbled note on the back of every receipt. I dug like my life depended on it. Because for the first time in 2 years, I knew exactly what I was looking for. I just didn't know what it looked like yet. I picked up an old, battered copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. It was Grandma's favorite book. I fanned the pages. Nothing fell out, but as I went to set it down, I felt something. The back cover felt too thick. It felt stiff. I ran my fingers along the inside edge of the binding. There was a tiny, almost invisible slit in the paper lining. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached for a letter opener. I sliced the paper open. Inside, tucked between the cardboard and the leather, was a small, flat key and a folded piece of yellow legal paper. I pulled them out. My hands were shaking. I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a check. It was a list of numbers. And at the bottom, in Grandma June's unmistakable, jagged handwriting, was a single sentence. For Hazel, do not open until the wolves are at the door. I looked at the key. It was old, brass, and stamped with a number 402. I didn't know where the key went. I didn't know what the numbers meant. But as I sat there on the floor of my cheap apartment, wearing a maid's uniform that smelled of bleach, I knew one thing: the wolves were at the door, and Grandma June had just handed me a shotgun. The brass key with the number 402 sat on my coffee table, gleaming under the harsh light of a single desk lamp. It looked heavy, important, and completely useless. A key is only a tool if you know which lock it fits. And right now, all I had was a piece of metal and a list of numbers that looked like nonsense. I had spent the last 2 hours staring at the yellow legal paper I had found in the lining of Grandma June's book. The numbers didn't correspond to dates or dollar amounts. They were random. 3, 8, 1, 9, 5, 5. It was a chaotic scramble. I felt a headache pulsing behind my eyes. I was missing a piece of the puzzle. I needed context. I needed to know what was happening in Grandma's life right before she died. During those final weeks when my father had restricted access to her, claiming she was too tired for visitors, that was when I remembered the phone. When I was in college, I had a different phone. It was an older model with a cracked screen that I had paid for myself with library wages. The day my father cut me off. The day he declared me a thief and demanded repayment. He had also canceled the family plan service, but I hadn't thrown the device away. I had simply thrown it into a junk drawer in my apartment and bought a cheap prepaid burner for my job hunt. I scrambled up from the floor and ran to the kitchen. I yanked open the drawer where I kept batteries, rubber bands, and broken pens. There, buried under a tangle of charging cables, was the old phone. I found a compatible charger and plugged it in. The waiting felt like torture. It took 10 minutes for the red battery icon to turn into a loading screen. When the device finally buzzed to life, it was like opening a time capsule. The wallpaper was a photo of me and a college friend I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. The text messages were from a life that felt like it belonged to a stranger, invitations to parties, study group reminders, jokes about exams. I ignored the texts. I went straight to the voicemail. There was one saved message. It was dated 4 years ago. The timestamp was 3 days after Grandma June's funeral. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed play. "Ms. Ellis?" A man's voice crackled through the tinny speaker. It was professional, crisp, but tinged with urgency. "This is Arthur Sterling from Sterling and Associates. I am calling regarding the estate of June Caldwell. We have been trying to reach you by mail, but the letters have been returned. We need to schedule a time for you to come in and review the documents your grandmother left in your name. Please call us back at your earliest convenience. It is time sensitive." I sat there, frozen. I had never received a letter. I had never received a notification. At the time of the funeral, I was living at home, in my parents' house, grieving. I checked the mail every day, or I thought I did. I grabbed my current phone and dialed the number from the voicemail. Praying the firm still existed, it rang 3 times. "Sterling and Associates. How may I direct your call?" "I need to speak to Arthur Sterling," I said. My voice sounded hollow. "My name is Hazel Ellis. He called me a long time ago." There was a pause. One moment. A minute later, a woman came on the line. She wasn't Arthur Sterling. She introduced herself as the office manager. "Ms. Ellis?" she said, sounding confused. "I see the file here, but it is marked as closed." Closed? I gripped the phone tighter. How can it be closed? I never signed anything. "Well," she said, the sound of typing clicking in the background. "According to our notes, the executor of the estate contacted us shortly after that voicemail was left. He informed us that you were aware of the bequest, but had declined involvement due to personal matters. He handled the dissolution of the assets." "Who was the executor?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Calvin Ellis," she said. The room spun. It wasn't just a figure of speech. I actually had to put a hand on the floor to steady myself. My father hadn't just sabotaged my job prospects. He hadn't just humiliated me in restaurants. He had intercepted my inheritance. He had looked a lawyer in the eye or lied over the phone and claimed I didn't want what my grandmother had left me. He had erased me from the legal record. "He lied," I whispered. "I never declined. I never knew. I am sorry. Ms. Ellis," the woman said, her voice dropping to a cautious, legal tone. "But the file has been archived for 4 years. The assets were distributed according to the executor's instructions in the absence of a contesting beneficiary. If you want to challenge this, you would need to file a motion in probate court. But I have to warn you, without the original documents. Where are the documents? I interrupted. They were transferred, she said. When the file was closed, the physical copies were either handed over to the executor or destroyed after the retention period. We don't have the originals anymore. I hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I felt a cold, terrifying clarity settling over me. My father had been thorough. He had cut the lines of communication so effectively that I didn't even know I was bleeding. He had stolen my birthright and called it declining involvement. But he had made a mistake. He had assumed that the only way Grandma June could leave me something was through a will. He thought the law firm was the only door. I looked back at the brass key and the yellow paper. Grandma June knew him. She knew he was a bully. She knew he would try to control the narrative. That was why she hadn't put everything in the official will. She had created a failsafe. I picked up the yellow paper again, the list of numbers, the code. I forced myself to stop looking at them as math. I looked at them as language. Grandma and I used to play word games when I was a teenager. She loved puzzles. She used to say that the best place to hide a secret was inside a boring detail. I looked at the phrase written at the top of the page, which I had dismissed as a doodle. It was written in cursive blueberries in December. It didn't make sense. We didn't grow blueberries, and they certainly didn't grow in December. But then, a memory hit me like a physical blow. I was 12 years old. Grandma took me to the city for a business trip, which was really just an excuse for us to eat pastries and walk around. We had stopped at a building with massive blue marble pillars. I remembered asking her if it was a palace. She had laughed. "No, Hazel, it's a bank. It's where I keep the things I don't want your father to count." She had called it the Blueberry Bank because of the marble. It was a private joke between us. I grabbed my laptop and searched for banks in the state capital with blue marble architecture. It took me 5 minutes. Merchants Traders Trust. It was an old private bank, the kind that didn't advertise on billboards and didn't have mobile apps. It was the kind of place that valued discretion over convenience. I looked at the key again. 402. It wasn't a house key. It was a safe deposit box key. I didn't wait. I didn't care that I had a shift at the lodge in 3 hours. I called the lodge and told Tessa I had a family emergency. It was the first time I had ever called out. "Don't make a habit of it, Ellis," she barked. But she didn't fire me. I got in my car and drove. The drive to the Capitol took 90 minutes. I spent every mile checking my rearview mirror. Paranoid that my father's truck was behind me, I felt like I was carrying a bomb. If he knew what I was doing, if he knew I had found the crack in his wall, he would stop at nothing to crush me. When I walked into Merchants Traders Trust, I felt out of place. My shoes were scuffed, my jeans were faded, the lobby was silent, smelling of old money and floor wax. A clerk in a pinstriped suit looked up at me. "May I help you?" "I need to access a box," I said. My voice was trembling. "I have the key. Name, Hazel Ellis, but the box might be under June Caldwell." The clerk typed into his terminal. He frowned. "I have a box, 402 under a trust, the Caldwell Ellis Trust." My heart skipped a beat. She had put my name on it. "I am Hazel Ellis," I said, sliding my driver's license across the marble counter. He studied the ID. He studied me. "I need to verify the signature card. One moment." He disappeared into a back room. I stood there, sweating. What if my father had gotten here too? What if he had forged my signature? What if the box was empty? 5 minutes later, the clerk returned. He had a different expression on his face. Respect. "Everything appears to be in order, Ms. Ellis, if you will follow me." He led me into the vault. It was a room lined with steel drawers, floor to ceiling. The air was cool and dry. He walked to row 4, drawer 02. "You will need to use your key," he said. "I will use the bank's master key." I inserted the brass key. It fit perfectly. We turned them in unison. The lock clicked, a heavy, mechanical sound that echoed in the silence. The clerk pulled the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. He set it on the table and left, closing the door behind him. I was alone with the box. I took a breath that rattled in my chest. I opened the lid. There was no cash. There were no diamonds. There was just a single, thick envelope, sealed with wax, and a leather-bound notebook. I picked up the envelope. On the front, in Grandma's handwriting, it said, "Hazel. Open this only when you are ready to burn the bridge." I broke the seal. Inside was a letter and a formal certificate. I pulled the certificate out first. It was a stock certificate, but it wasn't for a publicly traded company I recognized. It was for a private equity stake. I read the name of the company printed in elegant Gothic script at the top, Crownford Meridian Group. The date of issuance was over 12 years ago. My stomach dropped. Crownford Meridian, the same company my father was obsessing over, the same company hosting the gala he was desperate to attend. The giant conglomerate that was swallowing up smaller firms across the region. Grandma June hadn't just bought stock. According to the number of shares listed in the class of the stock Class A, voting, she was a founding investor. I unfolded the letter. My dearest Hazel, if you are reading this, your father has likely done something unforgivable. I am sorry I wasn't there to stop him. Calvin is a man who builds cages because he is afraid of the sky. He thinks he owns the ground he stands on. But he forgets who bought the land. Years ago, I helped a young woman named Marianne Vale start a small consulting firm. I believed in her when the banks didn't. That firm became Crownford Meridian. I took my repayment in equity, not cash, and I placed that equity in a blind trust for you. Your father knows I invested, but he thinks I sold out years ago. He thinks this money is gone. It is not gone. It has grown. But this isn't just money. Hazel, this is leverage. Marianne Vale knows who you are. She knows to wait for you, but you must go to her. You must walk through the front door, not as a beggar, but as a partner. Enclosed is the contact information for her private office. Do not call. Go there. And when you see your father again, do not fight him with emotion. Fight him with records. Love, Grandma June. I sat back in the chair, the letter shaking in my hand. My father was trying to network his way into a partnership with Crownford Meridian. He was begging for an invite to their gala. He was trying to impress Marianne Vale. And all this time, the woman he was trying to woo was holding a seat for me. Grandma didn't just leave me money. She left me a weapon. She left me a route into the one room my father couldn't buy his way into. I looked at the date on the certificate again. 2012. For 14 years. This had been waiting in the dark, waiting for me to be desperate enough to find it. I put the papers back in the envelope. I stood up. I didn't feel tired anymore. I didn't feel like the housekeeper at Lakeshore Pines. I didn't feel like the girl who stole software. I felt dangerous. I walked out of the bank with the envelope tucked inside my jacket. Pressed against my heart. I had a lot of work to do. I had to buy a suit. I had to buy a bus ticket. And I had to prepare for the most important interview of my life. My father had spent 2 years telling the world I was a thief. He was about to find out that he was right. I was going to steal his company, his reputation, and his entire future. And I was going to do it with a smile. The key to the safe deposit box was still burning a hole in my pocket 2 days later when my phone rang. I was in the break room at the lodge, eating a stale bagel and trying to massage the cramps out of my calves. When I saw the caller ID, I almost dropped my food. It was my father. I stared at the screen. Calvin Ellis did not call me. He summoned me via intermediaries, or he waited for me to crawl back to him. He had not dialed my number since the day he kicked me out of his office. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity, mixed with a healthy dose of dread, made me swipe the green button. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Hazel," he said. The tone was wrong. It wasn't the cold, imperious bark I was used to. It wasn't the smug, mocking tone he had used at the restaurant just 48 hours ago. It was warm. It was thick with a syrupy, manufactured affection that sounded like a bad actor reading from a teleprompter. "How are you holding up, honey?" he asked. "Your mother and I were talking, and we just hate to think of you struggling out there. It keeps us up at night." I leaned against the vending machine. narrowing my eyes. You seemed fine with it when you were laughing at me in the lobby on Tuesday. He chuckled, a rich, forgiving sound that made my skin crawl. Oh, you know how Weston is. And I was just trying to show you the reality of the situation. Tough love, Hazel. It is the hardest kind to give. But listen, I am calling because I think this has gone on long enough. You have made your point. You are independent. We get it. He paused, letting the silence hang there, heavy and pregnant. Come home, he said softly. I am ready to wipe the slate clean. I will make a few calls. I can fix your reputation. Hazel, I can tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. You can have your old room back. We can be a family again. No more fighting. The offer hung in the air like a piece of meat on a hook. Why? I asked. Why now? Because you are my daughter, he said. And because I want you to have a future. Just think about it. The door is open. He hung up. I stared at the phone, my heart racing. He was lying. I knew it in my bones. Calvin Ellis didn't offer amnesty unless he needed something. He didn't fix reputations unless the broken reputation was suddenly costing him money. 10 minutes later, my mother called. Her approach was different. She didn't offer deals. She offered guilt. She sounded breathless, bordering on tears. Please, Hazel, she whispered. Just come home. He's in a good mood right now. If you accept his offer today, everything can go back to normal. We can have Sunday dinners. You can stop scrubbing floors. Isn't that what you want, Ice? Peace isn't submission. Mom, I said. It is the only peace you are going to get, she said, her voice tightening. Don't be selfish. Hazel, he is trying to help you. He has big plans. He is thinking about your future. She hung up before I could ask what those plans were. Then came the text from Weston. It arrived an hour later. Short and brutal. Stop embarrassing us. Dad's offer is the best you're going to get. Be realistic for once in your life. You're running out of road. I put the phone away. The coordination was too precise. It was a full-court press. They were trying to herd me into a corral, and I didn't know why. I felt like a deer sensing the vibrations of a trap snapping shut, but I couldn't see the hunter. I found out the reason 3 hours later. I was assigned to restocking the coffee stations for a private meeting in the Oak Room, a small, secluded conference space at the back of the lodge. It was reserved for high-level guests who wanted privacy. I pushed my cart down the service hallway, a narrow corridor that ran parallel to the meeting rooms, separated only by thin walls and ventilation grates. As I approached the Oak Room service door, I heard a voice I recognized instantly. It was my father. He wasn't using his dad voice. He was using his deal voice, the deep, resonant baritone he employed when he was negotiating a contract. The supply chain is solid, he was saying. We have locked down the logistics for the next 5 years. Ellis Supply is the only game in town for the new highway expansion. I know the numbers. Calvin, another man replied. His voice was gravelly, older. I didn't recognize it, but it sounded expensive. The numbers are good, but a merger of this size, it is about more than concrete. It is about legacy. My son is taking over the firm next year. He needs stability. He needs roots in this community if we are going to expand into Brackenridge. I froze. My hand hovered over the coffee pot. That is exactly why this makes sense, my father said. I could hear the smile in his voice. We aren't just joining companies. Arthur, we are joining families. That is how the old guard did it. And that is how it stays permanent. And the girl? The man asked. Hazel, I heard there were issues. My breath hitched in my throat. Youthful rebellion. My father dismissed it smoothly. She is spirited, high honors student, sharp as a tack. She just needed to be brought to heel. And I have handled it. She is ready to settle down. She understands her role now. She would make an excellent wife for a man with political ambitions. She knows how to run a household. She knows the numbers. And she knows when to be quiet. If she is on board, the man said slowly, then we have a deal. My son needs a wife who adds value, not drama. If you can deliver the girl and the supply chain, We will sign the acquisition papers next month. Consider it done, my father said. She is coming home this week. I will arrange the introduction for the gala. I backed away from the door. My legs felt like they were made of water. I stumbled into the supply closet across the hall and shut the door, plunging myself into darkness. I sat on a bucket of floor wax, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. It wasn't just a job offer. It wasn't just about controlling me. He was selling me. He was trading me like a piece of livestock to seal a business merger. He had blackened my name, destroyed my independence, and starved me out. All to lower my market value so he could package me into a deal with a construction firm. He wanted to marry me off to some stranger's son to secure a contract for a highway expansion. She knows when to be quiet. The words echoed in my head, making me nauseous. He didn't see a daughter. He saw a dowry. He saw a bargaining chip. And the worst part was, he was right. If I had been weaker, if I hadn't found Grandma June's key, I might have taken his offer today. I might have walked right into the trap, thinking I was finding safety, only to find myself legally bound to a stranger and a contract I couldn't escape. He was trying to reassign my future. He was trying to rewrite my entire life to fit his profit margins. I stood up. The shaking stopped. I wasn't going home. I wasn't going to the gala as his trophy. I was leaving. Tonight. I finished my shift on autopilot. I didn't look at anyone. I didn't speak. My mind was a blur of logistics. I needed to get out of Brackenridge County. I needed to get out of the state. I drove home, threw my suitcase onto the bed, and started packing. I didn't fold anything. I just threw clothes, shoes, and toiletries into the bag. I looked at the apartment, the peeling paint, the mismatched furniture, and I felt nothing. It wasn't home. It was just a waiting room. I sat down at my laptop. I had one shot. I opened a map. I looked for cities that were far enough away that the name Ellis meant nothing. Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia. I started firing off applications. I didn't care what the job was. Data entry, night audit, receptionist. I just needed a paycheck and a zip code where my father couldn't call the manager. Then, I stopped. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope from the safety deposit box. I pulled out the letter from Grandma June. "Go there," she had written. I looked at the contact information she had included. It wasn't a general HR email. It was a direct line to the executive office of Marianne Vale. Vale, Crownford, Meridian, . It felt insane, . Crownford Meridian was a global powerhouse, . I was a blacklisted housekeeper with a gap in her resume and a reputation as a thief, . But Grandma June had left this for me. She had left it for when the wolves are at the door. The wolves weren't just at the door. They were in the hallway, discussing my sale price. I opened a new email draft. I didn't write a cover letter. I didn't try to explain my gap. I wrote 3 sentences. Dear Ms. Vale, my name is Hazel Ellis. I am the granddaughter of June Caldwell. I am holding the certificate she left for me, and I am ready to come in. I attached a copy of my resume, took a deep breath, and hit send. I closed the laptop. I felt like I had just jumped off a cliff in the dark. I continued packing. I expected nothing. I assumed the email would be filtered by a secretary or lost in a spam folder. I assumed I would be driving to a motel in the next state by morning, looking for waitress work. 20 minutes later, my computer chimed. I froze. It was 11 o'clock at night. No one replied to job applications at 11 o'clock at night. I walked over to the desk. The screen was glowing in the dark room. I had one new email. The sender was Executive Office. Marianne Vale. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Ms. Ellis, we have been waiting for this email for 12 years. The certificate you hold triggers a specific protocol within our governance bylaws. We need to verify the physical document immediately. Ms. Vale requests your presence for an interview and document verification tomorrow at 10 in the morning. A car has been dispatched to your address to bring you to the city. It will arrive at 7. Please be ready. I stared at the screen. I read it twice, then 3 times. A car. A protocol. 12 years. I wasn't just an applicant. I was a protocol. I looked out the window at the dark street. My father was probably asleep in his big house, dreaming of his merger, dreaming of the moment he would hand me over to his business partner like a set of keys to a new truck. He thought he had won. He thought I was cornered. He had no idea that I had just called in the cavalry. I zipped up my suitcase. I wasn't running away anymore. I was going to war. And for the first time in my life, I had the bigger gun. The email subject line sat in my inbox like a grenade with the pin pulled interview request office of the CEO, Crownford Meridian Group. I stared at the glowing screen of my laptop until my eyes burned. It had to be a mistake, or worse, a cruel prank orchestrated by my brother. I hovered the cursor over the sender's name, expecting to see a personal Gmail account or a spoofed address, but the domain was legitimate. It was the corporate server of one of the largest conglomerates on the East Coast. The body of the email was brief, precise, and terrifying. It did not ask for my availability. It stated it, Ms. Ellis, Marianne Vale has reviewed your file and requests a personal interview regarding a specialized opening in our analytical division. Please present yourself at our headquarters in the financial district at 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday. I read it 3 times. A specialized opening. I was a housekeeper who had been blacklisted from entry-level payroll jobs. Marianne Vale was a titan. She appeared on the cover of business magazines. She did not interview people. She acquired companies. The idea that she would carve time out of her schedule to speak to Hazel Ellis, the pariah of Brackenridge County, felt like a hallucination. But then I remembered the certificate in the safety deposit box. I remembered Grandma June's letter. Go there. My stomach churned with a mixture of nausea and adrenaline. This was it. This was the long shot. But as the initial shock wore off, the logistical reality crashed down on me. I had $42 in my checking account. The bus ticket to the city cost $68 round trip. A hotel room, even a Fleabag motel on the outskirts, would be at least another $80. I needed food. I needed subway fare. And most importantly, I needed to look like I belonged in a glass tower, not like I had just finished scrubbing a toilet. I didn't have a suit. My old interview clothes from college were either sold or ruined by the humidity in my parents' attic before I moved out. I closed the laptop and drove to the lodge. It was my day off. But I wasn't going there to work. I was going to beg. I found Tessa in her office, surrounded by the usual chaos of invoices and shift schedules. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes narrowing as she took in my pale face and shaking hands. You look like you've seen a ghost. Ellis, she said, tapping ash from her cigarette into a coffee mug. I need a favor, I said. A big one, and I need the next 2 days off. Tessa leaned back, the springs of her chair groaning. We have a wedding party checking in tomorrow. I need every hand on deck. You know the drill. I have an interview, I blurted out. In the city? With Crownford Meridian. Tessa froze. She stared at me for a long moment, the smoke curling around her face. She knew who they were. Everyone knew who they were. The investment firm, she asked. Yes. And you think they want to hire a maid? I think I have an in, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But I can't get there. I don't have the cash for the ticket until payday, and I don't have anything to wear. Tessa looked at me. For months, she had been a hard, fair boss. She didn't do charity. She didn't do emotions. But she also hated bullies, and she knew exactly who had put me in this uniform. She stood up and walked over to the coat rack behind the door. She pulled down a navy blue blazer. It was slightly dated, with shoulder pads that were a bit too aggressive for the current fashion, but the fabric was good wool. I wore this to my divorce hearing, she said, thrusting it into my hands. I won. Maybe it has some luck left in it. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out a wad of cash tips from the front desk pool and peeled off 4 $20 bills. This is a loan, she said sternly. You pay me back with interest when you get your first big-shot paycheck. And Ellis, I looked at her, clutching the jacket like a lifeline. You were never meant to disappear in a hallway, she said. Go make them regret they ever made you push a cart. I walked out of the lodge with the blazer over my arm and a knot in my throat. I caught the Greyhound bus at 6 that evening. The station smelled of diesel and wet pavement. I sat in the back, near the bathroom, clutching my bag, as the bus pulled onto the highway, leaving the county limits. I felt a physical shifting in my chest. The farther we got from Brackenridge, the lighter the air felt, but the fear was still there, a cold stone in my gut. I arrived in the city just after midnight. The skyline was a wall of light, indifferent and massive. I found a motel 6 blocks from the bus terminal. It was the kind of place where the carpet felt sticky and the neon sign outside buzzed with a dying flicker. I didn't sleep. I spent the night pacing the small room, rehearsing. I stood in front of the cracked mirror, wearing Tessa's blazer over a white blouse I had ironed 3 times. I looked at my reflection. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes. My hands were rough from the bleach. "So, Ms. Ellis," I whispered to my reflection, mimicking the voice of a CEO. "I see a 2-year gap in your resume. Tell me, what have you been doing since graduation?" I tried out different answers. "I have been freelancing." "No, too easy to check." "I was caring for a sick relative." "No, that was a lie." "I was working in hospitality." Technically true, but it sounded like I had failed at my chosen career. I realized that any answer I gave would sound insane. "How do you explain that you are a competent, high-honors accountant who has been scrubbing floors because your father is holding your reputation hostage?" It sounded like a conspiracy theory. It sounded like drama, and corporate CEOs hated drama. I sat on the edge of the bed, head in my hands. I was an imposter. I was a girl with a secret key and a borrowed jacket, trying to walk into the lion's den by 5 in the morning. I gave up on sleep. I showered, dressed, and drank 3 cups of terrible motel coffee. At 7 o'clock, my phone rang. I stared at it. It wasn't the alarm. It was a call. The screen flashed Dad. My heart stopped. He shouldn't know. I hadn't told anyone except Tessa. I hadn't posted on social media. I hadn't used a credit card. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 2 seconds later, it rang again and again. He knew, somehow, in the way that rot always finds the crack in the foundation. He knew. I answered on the 4th ring. I didn't say hello. "Turn around." "Hazel," my father said. His voice was calm, conversational, which made it terrifying. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Don't play dumb. It is beneath you," he said. "I know you are in the city. I know you have some foolish notion about crashing the Crownford offices. Who put you up to this? Did you think you could just walk in off the street?" "I have an interview," I said. "You have a delusion," he snapped. "Do you have any idea who Marianne Vale is? She is a shark. She eats girls like you for breakfast. And do you think she doesn't know who I am? We have mutual associates. Hazel. One phone call from me, just one, and security won't even let you pass the turnstile. I can have you blacklisted in this city just as easily as I did at home." "You don't control everything," I said. "I control enough," he said. "Now, listen to me. Get back on the bus. Come home. The offer for the marriage arrangement is still on the table, but my patience is wearing thin. If you walk into that building, you are declaring war, and you do not have the ammunition to fight me." "I guess we'll see," I said. And I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the phone. He was bluffing. He had to be. But the doubt was a poison, spreading fast. What if he had already called? What if I walked in there and they laughed at me? Then my phone buzzed with a text. It was Weston. Dad already handled it. He called their VP of operations 10 minutes ago. "You're done. Don't waste your time. Just come home and stop being pathetic." I stared at the message. Dad already handled it. I felt like vomiting. I wanted to take off the blazer, check out of the motel, and disappear. The fear was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders, begging me to be small, to be safe, to be obedient. But then I thought about the lodge. I thought about the way Weston had laughed at me in the lobby. I thought about the smell of bleach on my hands. If I turned around now, I wasn't just going back to a job. I was going back to a prison. I grabbed my portfolio. I checked for the envelope. It was there. No, I said aloud to the empty room. I walked out of the motel. The Crownford Meridian Tower was a monolith of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the sky. It stood in the center of the financial district, reflecting the morning sun with a brilliance that hurt my eyes. Men and women in $5,000 suits streamed through the revolving doors, looking focused and important. I stood on the sidewalk, clutching my cheap bag. I felt small. I felt like a fraud. But I walked toward the doors. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through mud. Every step was a battle against the instinct to flee. Turn around. My brain screamed. He called them. It's over. They are going to humiliate you. I pushed through the revolving door. The lobby was cavernous. The air was cool and smelled of white tea and money. Security guards stood at a marble desk that was longer than my entire apartment. I approached the desk. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Name? The guard asked, not looking up. Hazel Ellis, I said. My voice was steady. I don't know how. He typed into his computer. I held my breath. I waited for the red light. I waited for him to frown and say, I'm sorry, Ms. Ellis, you have been flagged. I waited for my father's reach to close around my throat one last time. The guard stopped typing. He looked up. His expression wasn't dismissive. It was surprised. Ms. Ellis, he said. He picked up a phone. She is here. He hung up and looked at me. Private elevator bank, C, top floor. They are holding the car for you. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask for a pass. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My father hadn't stopped it. He hadn't handled it. For the first time in 2 years, his voice didn't matter. I walked toward the elevators. I caught my reflection in the polished brass of the doors. I was wearing a borrowed jacket and shoes that were scuffed at the heel, but my head was high. I pressed the button for the top floor. The doors closed, sealing me in. I was going up, and I had the strangest feeling that I wasn't the only one in the elevator. I felt like Grandma June was standing right beside me, straightening my collar and whispering, "About time, kid." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was so smooth, it felt like I was standing still while the world dropped away beneath me. When the brass doors finally slid open, the air pressure change popped in my ears, a physical reminder that I had ascended to an altitude where the oxygen was thinner and the stakes were lethal. I stepped out into a lobby that looked less like an office and more like a modern art museum. The floors were white marble, veined with gray, polished to such a high shine that I could see the scuff marks on my borrowed shoes reflected in them with humiliating clarity. The walls were glass, offering a panoramic view of the city that made the cars below look like toys. There was no clutter. There were no ringing phones. There was just a profound, expensive silence. I tugged at the hem of Tessa's navy blue blazer. In the dim light of the motel room, it had looked passable. Here, under the unforgiving recessed lighting, the fabric looked coarse and tired. The shoulder pads felt enormous, like I was a child playing dress-up in a costume that didn't fit the narrative. I felt the sweat prickling along my hairline. I was an intruder in the temple of high finance, a housekeeper with bleach burns on her hands trying to bluff her way past the gatekeepers. A woman sat behind a sleek, floating desk made of frosted glass. She didn't look like the receptionists I had encountered during my desperate job hunt in Brackenridge. She wasn't chewing gum or looking bored. She was typing on a silent keyboard, wearing a headset that looked like jewelry. She stopped typing the moment I stepped off the carpet runner. She stood up. I braced myself for the rejection. I prepared my speech, the one about having an appointment, about the email, about please just checking the schedule. Ms. Ellis, she said. Her voice was warm, professional, and devoid of any question mark. Welcome to Crownford Meridian. Ms. Vale is expecting you. She didn't ask for ID. She didn't ask me to sign a visitor log. She walked around the desk and gestured toward a set of double doors made of frosted glass. She cleared her morning for you, the receptionist added softly. Go right in. I walked toward the doors, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was the moment, the impossible interview. I wiped my damp palms on my skirt, took a breath that didn't quite fill my lungs, and pushed the doors open. The office was vast. It was a corner suite, meaning 2 walls were entirely glass. Flooding the room with morning light, in the center of the room, there was no massive intimidation desk. Instead, there was a low seating area with cream-colored sofas and a coffee table made of reclaimed wood. Marianne Vale was standing by the window, looking out at the harbor. She turned as the door clicked shut. I knew her face from business magazines and financial news segments. She was known as the Iron Lady of Equity, a woman who could dismantle a failing corporation with surgical precision. I expected a shark. I expected cold eyes and a predatory stance. What I found was a woman who looked strangely gentle. She was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that fit her like a second skin. Her hair was silver, cut in a sharp bob that framed a face that had seen battles but kept its humanity. She looked at me, and for a long, stretching second, she didn't say a word. She just studied me. She looked at the ill-fitting blazer. She looked at my hands, still red from the chemicals at the lodge. She looked at my eyes, and then she smiled. It wasn't a corporate smile. It was the smile of someone recognizing an old friend in a crowd. "Hello, Hazel," she said. "Ms. Vale?" I managed to choke out. "Thank you for seeing me. I know my resume is unconventional." She waved a hand. Dismissing the very idea of a resume, "You look just like her," she said quietly. "Around the eyes, you have June's defiance." She walked over to the seating area and motioned for me to sit. I perched on the edge of the cream sofa, terrified I might stain it with the dust of the bus ride. "You didn't come here for a job interview, Hazel," Marianne said, sitting opposite me. Her tone was direct, cutting through the pretense immediately. "You came here because June finally gave you the key." "I found it in a book," I said. "The Count of Monte Cristo." Marianne laughed, a genuine, throaty sound. Of course she did. She always did have a flair for the dramatic. She told me once that revenge is a dish best served with proper documentation. Marianne stood up again and walked to the far wall, where a large abstract painting hung. She pressed a hidden panel, and the painting slid aside to reveal a wall safe. My breath caught in my throat. This was exactly like the movies. Only the air in the room was heavy with a very real tension. She keyed in a code 6 digits, and the heavy steel door swung open. The safe was empty, except for one thing, a thick, manila envelope. It was old. The edges were slightly yellowed. On the front, written in black ink that had faded to a dark gray over the years, was a name. Hazel. It was my grandmother's handwriting. Seeing it there, in this high-altitude fortress of power, made tears sting my eyes. It was a piece of home, a piece of the only love that had ever felt safe, preserved in a steel box for over a decade. Marianne took the envelope and placed it on the coffee table between us. "She gave this to me 12 years ago," Marianne said. "We were just starting to expand then. June came to my office. She was already sick. Though she didn't tell anyone, she handed me this envelope and gave me a single, explicit instruction. She made me swear on my reputation that I would not open it, and I would not release it, until Hazel Ellis walked through my doors seeking employment of her own free will. She knew," I whispered. "She knew I would need a way out." "She knew your father," Marianne corrected. "Go ahead. Open it." I reached for the envelope. My hands were trembling so much I had trouble with the clasp. I pulled out the contents. There were 3 things. The first was a letter, folded into a small square. The second was a leather-bound journal, similar to the ledgers I had used in accounting class. The third was a document with a heavy, raised seal and a red ribbon. I picked up the document first. It was a stock certificate. I read the text, my brain struggling to process the legal jargon. It was a certificate of ownership for Class A founding shares in Crownford Meridian Group. I looked at the number of shares. Then I looked at the valuation date. I don't understand, I said, looking up at Marianne. Grandma June had a hardware store. She did well in real estate, but this is a significant portion of this company. Marianne finished for me. June was my first investor. Hazel, when everyone else in the city laughed at a female-led equity firm, your grandmother wrote me a check that cleared out her liquidity. She bet on me, and when we went public, she didn't cash out. She converted her position. Marianne leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. She converted her entire stake into a blind trust, the Caldwell Ellis Trust, but she structured it very carefully to the outside world, and specifically to your father. It looked like she had sold her shares and donated the proceeds to various charities. The paper trail he saw showed a divestment, but the real paper trail, the one in your hands, shows a transfer. A transfer to who? I asked. To you, Marianne said. You have been a silent partner in Crownford Meridian since you were 15 years old. You own 12% of this company, Hazel, and unlike the common stock, your shares carry voting rights. The room spun. 12%? Voting rights? I wasn't just an applicant. I wasn't just a housekeeper. I was one of the owners of the building I was sitting in. But why hide it? I asked. Why let me struggle? Why let my father torment me for 2 years over a credit card debt if I had this? Because of the journal, Marianne said. Pointing to the leather book, I picked up the journal. I opened it to a random page. It wasn't a financial ledger. It was a log. October 14th, 2010. Calvin made Hazel return the dress she bought for the dance. Told her she looked cheap. Saw the light go out in her eyes. He is testing the fences. He wants to see how small he can make her. I turned the page. August 3rd, 2012. Weston broke a window. Calvin blamed Hazel. She took the punishment without a word. She is learning to survive, but she is forgetting how to fight. If I give her the money now, Calvin will take it. He will bully her into signing it over, or he will guilt her into giving him control. She is not ready. She needs to see him for what he is. She needs to be hungry. I closed the book. A sob escaped my throat, raw and painful. She had watched. She had seen every cruelty, every slight, every moment of manipulation, and she had made the hardest choice a grandmother could make. She had let me walk through the fire so that I would be strong enough to hold the sword when she finally handed it to me. She knew that if you had access to this money while you were still under his roof, he would have drained you dry. Marianne said softly. She needed you to break free first. She needed you to come here not because you were rich, but because you were desperate enough to burn the bridge. I touched the certificate. Does he know? He has no idea, Marianne said. He thinks June was a foolish old woman who frittered away her potential. He thinks he is the only business genius in the family. Marianne's expression shifted then. The gentleness evaporated, replaced by the steel that had made her a legend on Wall Street. Her eyes went cold. Which brings us to this morning, she said. I stiffened. He called you. He did, Marianne said. At 8:15. He somehow found out you were coming here. He called my direct line. He called in a favor from a board member to get the number. He was quite frantic. I could imagine it. My father, pacing in his office, sweating, realizing that his control was slipping. What did he say? I asked. Marianne sat back, crossing her legs. He tried to warn me. He told me that he was speaking as a concerned father and a pillar of the business community. He told me that you were mentally unstable. He told me you had a history of financial impropriety. He used the word thief 3 times. He said hiring you would be a liability to the firm's reputation. She paused, a dangerous smile curling the corner of her lip. He offered to come and collect you. He said he would handle the situation quietly if I just denied you entry. My blood ran cold. Even here. Even now. He was trying to drag me back to the cage. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him that I appreciated his concern. Marianne said. And I told him that I would take his feedback under advisement. I let him talk. Hazel, I let him dig the hole. I had my secretary transcribe the entire call. She leaned forward, and her voice dropped to a whisper that sounded like a thunderclap. He thought he was talking to a potential business partner. He thought he was talking to a peer. He thought he was sabotaging a housekeeper. Marianne tapped the stock certificate on the table. He didn't realize who he was slandering. He was on the phone with the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, accusing one of its largest voting shareholders of theft and fraud. In the corporate world, Hazel, that is not just a lie, that is a tort, that is actionable damage to a fiduciary. She stood up and extended her hand to me. He thinks he is coming to the gala next week to network. He thinks he is going to shake hands and make a deal. I stood up. I looked at my hand, the hand that had scrubbed floors. The hand that had written checks to pay back a debt I didn't owe. I took Marianne's hand. Her grip was firm, solid, equal. He is coming to a funeral, I said. He just doesn't know it's his. Marianne nodded. Welcome to the board, Ms. Ellis. We have a lot of work to do before the gala. Let's get you a suit that fits. The week leading up to the Crownford Meridian Annual Charity Gala was a blur of activity that felt less like corporate preparation and more like the mobilization of an army. Marianne Vale did not do things by halves. She brought in a tailor to fit me for a tuxedo suit, sharp, black, and perfectly tailored because she said I was done wearing costumes that didn't belong to me. She briefed the legal team. She walked me through the venue, but the hardest part wasn't the logistics, it was the decision. We were sitting in her office on Tuesday afternoon, overlooking the gray expanse of the harbor. Marianne had just outlined the plan for the evening. She wanted to introduce me, not quietly, not in a press release next week. She wanted to bring me on stage during the keynote speech, right when the room was at its fullest, right when my father would be working the room for his contracts. I hesitated. The old instinct to shrink, to hide, to avoid the conflict was still a frantic drumbeat in my chest. Is this necessary? I asked, looking at my hands. I have the shares. I have the job. I don't need to humiliate him. Can't we just let him fade away? Marianne set down her teacup. The sound of china on glass was sharp. Hazel, she said, her voice dropping to that steel core register. This isn't about revenge. It is about truth. For 2 years, your father has been holding a microphone and telling the world you are a criminal. He has destroyed your credit, your reputation, and your peace. If we do this quietly, the lie survives. People will say you got lucky. They will say you charmed me. They will whisper that you are still a thief who just found a bigger purse. She leaned forward. You deserve to stand in a place where his lies cannot reach you, and the only way to do that is to turn the lights on, all of them. You have to show them that the monster is just a small man with a loud voice. She was right. I knew she was right. On the night of the gala, the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of velvet, silk, and diamonds. The air smelled of expensive perfume and floral arrangements that cost more than my entire college tuition. The room was humming with the low, polite roar of 500 of the wealthiest people on the East Coast. I stood backstage, hidden behind a heavy velvet curtain. My heart was pounding against my ribs. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. I smoothed the lapels of my new suit. I checked my reflection in a propped-up mirror. I didn't look like a housekeeper. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who owned 12% of the building, through the gap in the curtain. I scanned the crowd. It took me 3 minutes to find him. Calvin Ellis was standing near the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne. He looked immaculate in his tuxedo, his chest puffed out, holding court with a group of men I recognized as local contractors and the potential merger partner, Arthur. My mother was beside him, smiling that frozen, terrified smile, nodding at everything he said. Weston was there too, looking bored and arrogant. Checking his watch, they looked like the perfect family, the successful patriarch, the dutiful wife, the heir. They looked like they had won. My father was laughing at something Arthur said, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. He was closing the deal. He was probably minutes away from shaking hands on the agreement that would trade my future for his highway contract. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The conversation died down. A spotlight hit the stage. Marianne Vale walked out to the podium. The applause was polite, respectful. She waited for it to settle. "Good evening," she said. "Tonight is about legacy. We are here to celebrate 20 years of Crownford Meridian. We are here to honor the foundations upon which this company was built." She paused. Her eyes scanned the room and landed, briefly, on my father. "Many of you know our history," she continued. "You know that we started small, but few of you know the silent partner who made it all possible. For over a decade, there has been a vacant seat on our board, a seat held in trust for a founding stakeholder who was waiting for the right moment to step forward." I saw my father frown. He leaned in to whisper something to Arthur. He didn't understand. He thought this was just corporate speech. "Tonight," Marianne said, her voice ringing clear, "that wait is over. It is my distinct honor to introduce you to our newest senior analyst and the beneficiary of the Caldwell founding shares, Ms. Hazel Ellis." The curtain parted. I walked out. The spotlight hit me, blinding and warm. I walked to the center of the stage and stood next to Marianne. The silence in the room was absolute. Then, a ripple of confusion went through the crowd. I saw people whispering, but I only watched one person. My father's face went slack. The champagne glass in his hand tilted dangerously. He blinked, as if trying to clear a glitch in his vision. He looked at me. He looked at Marianne. He looked at the screen behind us, where my name was projected in 5-foot letters. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. He turned a color of red I had never seen before. He started pushing through the crowd. "No," he said. It was loud enough to be heard over the murmurs. "No!" He shoved past a waiter, nearly knocking a tray of drinks over. He marched toward the stage, his eyes wild. He wasn't thinking about the merger. He wasn't thinking about the elite crowd. He was thinking about control, and the fact that his property had just walked onto a stage he couldn't reach. "This is a mistake," he shouted. Reaching the base of the stage, he pointed a shaking finger at me. "She doesn't belong here." The room gasped. Security guards stepped forward, but Marianne held up a hand to stop them. She wanted this. "Mr. Ellis," Marianne said, her voice amplified by the microphone, calm and deadly. "Please lower your voice." "I will not lower my voice," he screamed. The mask of the benevolent businessman had shattered completely. "That girl is a fraud. She is my daughter, and she is a thief. She embezzled money from me. She is a liar." He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms, desperate to recruit them to his reality. "She is mentally unstable," he yelled. "She has been working as a maid because no one in our county will trust her with $1. This is a con. She has tricked you." Marianne. The accusation hung in the air. Ugly and raw. Thief. The word that had been my prison for 2 years. Marianne didn't flinch. She looked down at him with the expression of a judge looking at a disorderly defendant. "Mr. Ellis," she said, "we have the receipts." My father froze. "We have the original software purchase receipts," Marianne continued, her voice cool and factual. "We have the bank transfer records showing Hazel repaid you in full. We have the logs of your phone calls to 27 different employers in Brackenridge County, systematically slandering her character to prevent her from earning a living. That's private family business," my father sputtered. "And," Marianne cut him off, "we have the transcript of your conversation in the hallway of the Lakeshore Pines Lodge 3 days ago." My father went pale. Marianne looked out at the audience, directly at Arthur, the man my father was trying to impress. "Mr. Ellis was not just trying to punish his daughter," Marianne said. "He was attempting to leverage her into a marriage arrangement to secure a highway supply contract. He referred to her as an asset to be brought to heel. He was selling her to secure a merger." The room went deadly silent. This wasn't just drama. This was barbarism. In the polite society of high finance, you could be ruthless, but you could not be crude. You could not sell your children. Arthur, the merger partner, took a step back. He looked at my father with a mixture of horror and disgust. He set his glass down on a passing tray and turned his back. My father saw the shift. He saw the room turning against him. Panic seized him. "She's lying," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "It's my money. It was my mother's money. She had no right to give it to her. I am the head of this family. I decide what happens to her. I had to break her. She wouldn't listen." The confession echoed off the vaulted ceiling. I had to break her. He had admitted it, in front of 500 witnesses. He hadn't done it for justice. He hadn't done it for discipline. He had done it because I wouldn't obey. The reaction of the room was immediate and devastating. There was no booing. There was no shouting. There was just the cold, collective withdrawal of respect. People turned away. They checked their phones. They signaled for checks. They created a vacuum of attention around him. He was no longer a powerful businessman. He was a pathetic, abusive man screaming at a woman in a suit. My mother stood in the middle of the floor, her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years, and then she took a step away from him. I walked over to the podium. Marianne stepped aside. I looked down at my father. He was panting, his face slick with sweat, his eyes darting around the room, realizing he had just incinerated his own life. "I am not a thief. Dad," I said. My voice didn't shake. It filled the room. "And I am not your asset. I am done negotiating my dignity with you. I am done paying for your love with my life." I looked at Weston. He was staring at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. "The rumors stop tonight," I said. "Because the money you used to control me, it is gone. And the reputation you tried to destroy, it just bought 12% of the company you wanted to partner with." I stepped back. Security moved in then. Not for me. For him. They gently but firmly escorted a sputtering, broken Calvin Ellis toward the exit. He looked back once, but I didn't look at him. I looked at the audience. And then, someone started clapping. It was Arthur. Then Marianne joined in. Then the whole room. It wasn't a thunderous ovation. It was a steady, respectful applause. It was an acknowledgement. I had survived. The aftermath hit fast and hard. By the next morning, the story had circulated through the business community. The handshake deal for the highway contract evaporated. Arthur pulled out of the merger, citing ethical incompatibility. The local bank in Brackenridge, having heard about the unstable behavior of their largest client, called in a review of his credit lines. My father didn't go to jail, but he went to a different kind of prison. He became the pariah he had tried to make me. The country club quietly revoked his membership. The church board asked him to step down. He was left alone in his big house on the hill, shouting at walls that wouldn't listen. My mother moved out a month later. She didn't come to the city, but she rented a small condo near the coast. She sent me a letter. It didn't say sorry she wasn't strong enough for that yet, but it said she was proud of my suit. It was a start. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, I drove back to Brackenridge County one last time. I didn't go to the house. I didn't go to the lodge. I drove to the cemetery on the edge of town. The grass was wet with dew. I walked to the granite headstone that read, June Caldwell. I knelt down and placed the leather-bound journal on the earth. I opened the envelope I had carried for so long and took out the letter. I read it aloud to the wind. "You were right, Grandma," I said. "I had to burn the bridge to see the light." I traced her name on the cold stone. I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a clean, quiet space where my future used to be a question mark. I had a job I loved. I had an apartment in the city with a view of the river. I had friends who knew my real name and my real story. I was building a life that didn't require anyone's permission. "I'm free," I whispered. I stood up, brushed the dirt from the knees of my trousers, and walked back to my car. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I drove past the "Welcome to Brackenridge" sign. I just kept my eyes on the road ahead. The story they told about me was over. The story I was writing had just begun. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have ever had to fight to reclaim your own narrative from people who tried to write it for you, I want to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you want to support this channel, please subscribe to Kate Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and remember, the best revenge is a life well lived.